Good morning, everybody. I'm Raj Goyle, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Bodhala. Very excited to have to be here today, and I also like to put in a plug for Sylvia's book. It's terrific, and for the BLC in general, we're proud to sponsor. Sylvia, you're on mute. Could I just ask you one more time? Are we seeing videos? Yeah. Are we going to show videos of the panelists, or because right now
the panelists are seen. You're all
okay.
You're all visible.
I am. I see it now. I apologize. I have to get the Zoom settings done. Okay, thank you very much.
Not a problem.
So thanks, Sylvia. So we're really excited. We've got John and Chris, an all-star panel here. So very, very thrilled. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a second. Just to give a little bit of a run of show, we've got a good 55 minutes here. Hopefully we can give you a little bit of time back in your day, maybe 5 minutes on the back end. What I'd like to do is sort of really focus everybody. We have some really exciting information to share. And I think an interesting, I think like a lot of us, I've done a fair amount of these, attended them, moderated, spoken on them. I think actually what we're talking about today, if I had to, this is a little bit like choosing your favorite kid, but if I had to put a gun to my head and say probably the most important topic around actually getting through the data fog in our industry for procuring in the spend category, I think it's this. And John and Chris could not be better equipped. It's really an all-star group here for the two of them to be talking us through their pain points, what they're seeing in the market, and so on. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to let Chris and John introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into the current challenges with benchmarking. And benchmarking, of course, I think being in a sense the holy grail of what all of us, if you're a procurement person in any spend category, you assume there's a benchmark. But we know in the law there is no such one right now, and we're going to talk about why that's the case, what that means for our industry, and then about metrics that matter and about how you leverage them in negotiation. So without further ado, maybe I'll ask John to go first, just a minute overview of who you are and why you were interested in participating, and then we'll move over to Chris.
Yeah, good morning. My name's John Smith. I am Director of Legal Procurement at MetLife, focusing on outside counsel management. My day-to-day responsibilities include managing our e-billing system, law firm rate negotiations, RFPs, vendor management initiatives and metrics. I sit on our outside counsel management team with the chief of legal operations and then key internal stakeholders within legal affairs, including the chief of litigation and other representatives from each legal section, where we are charged with kind of pushing through initiatives that really affect our law firms across all the various legal sections. So for example, right now, one of some of the key projects that team's working on, we're launching a pilot with Pursuit, which is a legal RFP tool. I'm redrafting our outside counsel management counsel management billing guidelines, and then various diversity in the practice of law initiatives as well. Prior to MetLife, I was a litigation attorney for 7 years. So yeah, happy to be here this morning.
Great. Over to you, Chris.
Great, thanks. And my current role is very similar to John's. I am Director of Outside Counsel Management at Citi, working within our legal operations group, which is called Global Legal Solutions. And we oversee, or my group oversees, law firm rate and fee negotiations. We are developing our RFP program, very similar to John, working with Pursuit. Oversee the legal bill review program too. So we really look at the full engagement life cycle from the beginning, the fee negotiation piece of it, looking at data, trying to understand that, working with law firms, negotiating with law firms on that end of it, and then the retrospective piece on the billing review. Also, we just re-released our global terms of engagement, and we also oversee the network of law firms that we use globally. So it's a very similar role. So it should be interesting to get two different views from very similar seats, I think, today.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, John. Good to know. We also have an RFP platform, so we'll talk to you both you guys later. So one thing I neglected to do is, for many of you, I didn't actually explain what Bodhala is and why we're sponsoring. So Bodhala is the leading. We're the leading technology provider of analytics around outside counsel spend. So we have an AI and machine learning tool that actually tells you the should cost of that outside counsel spend. For obvious reasons, we work with people like John and Chris, and we have, we are growing very fast, and particularly in 2021. And so our team is growing. We're a venture-backed technology company, and I'm a Harvard Law graduate. My co-founder was HLS with me, and we combine sort of our legal domain knowledge with machine learning, and the result has been this really great piece of software, and with a human layer as well. And when we deploy it, clients that can tell folks around that, what that should cost is. So with that being said, that's Bodhala, and let's jump in. So I'd like to kind of preface this with, and what I'd like to do is kind of present some information and some thoughts, and then let Chris and John sort of react to it. And it is going to be around the current challenges with benchmarking, what solutions are out there, and really around data integrity. So if you could go to the next slide, Sylvia, please, which is, that's us. Those are our handsome mugs. So here we are. Here's the slide which we can focus on for a second, which is, so let's just level set for everybody, which is, if you were to say right now that I know what I should be paying for my outside on my outside counsel spend, if you say you know that, you're actually, I'm going to call BS on that one. Just to be very blunt, none of you understand, because it is impossible right now to understand with reliability what the market price for an outside counsel is. What we do is we do our best to make judgments. We take the data that we have. We may have these e-billing softwares, which I'll talk about in a second. We triangulate. We may hear from others. We may take some things that are out there, but it is not the same thing like in other spend categories, particularly for the procurement professionals on the phone who truly come from procurement, where there are reliable benchmarks. At a very small example, but it hits home, which is, if I have a 20% coupon for my $5 Big Mac, I know I saved $1. Why? Because there is an accepted baseline of the price of that market good, a $5 Big Mac. In the law, and I will say this with full disclosure, my wife happens to be a very successful equity partner at a major law firm, so I'm married to the movement. My co-founder was 10 years at Simpson Thacher. We have a lot of big law experience throughout my company. And the reality is that if you asked 100 John and Chris's and your general counsels, your bosses, do you expect discounts from your law firms? 100%, 100 hands would go up. If you ask law partners like my wife, do you discount on your rates out of 100 people? 100 hands would go up. You know what we just got? A vegetable market in Bombay. There is total chaos there. There is nothing standardized, because a discount doesn't mean a damn thing unless there is a baseline. All you're doing is in discount theater, in which you're feeling like it's good because the vendor is telling you, oh, I have this base rate. Shockingly, the vendor is in control of the denominator of that equation. So if I unilaterally say, suddenly, I just did an apartment renovation. If my architect or my contractor says, oh, well, it's a new year, everything goes up 10%. I would be like, I'm sorry, no, that doesn't work like that. But in our industry, we allow it to. The reason why that's happened, so that's the current state of play. And the reason that we put some of these other companies out there, which is people have attempted benchmarks. And also I should name check Citi, because Chris obviously knows Citi banks most of the AmLaw 200. There's a survey they put out there, which has really good data. But the buyer of legal services does not use any of these actual services and the Citi survey to actually use it to procure and to then negotiate. It's actually used by pricing professionals inside the vendor law firms to justify the prices they suggest to the buyers. And the reason is what's on this slide, which is right now, the challenges that you have with benchmarks is that the data is unreliable. There are no apples to apples comparisons, and there is a lack of market intelligence. And so, and we're going to, talk about that, more in a second. But the example of that is that when you, for example, take an awesome company called Reorg, many of you may know it, but in the restructuring world and bankruptcy, it's a big deal. CEO Kent Collier, phenomenal entrepreneur. Reorg takes the bankruptcy filings from that are public record. Many of you may know this, you may not know this, which is under bankruptcy code, street rates, law firms have to publish their rate card in order to actually get paid. But the problem is it's their full rate card. It has none of the discounts. So if you take that as an actual benchmark, you're wildly inflating what's actually happening in the market. It's just not realistic. So that's a problem there. The second thing is if you take any of these other three or what's out there in terms of benchmarks, the reason none of you use the quote benchmarks of your e-billing tool is because they are not taking into account invoice level discounts and write-offs. So somebody could have a rack rate of $1,500 an hour, and they could discount it, let's say 10%, just for easy math, it becomes $1,350. But what you really need is the net effective rate, because there's write-offs, there's discounts, your line attorneys are going to say, wait, I'm not paying that. So the actual rate that you're paying Bobby Smith over at Skadden becomes extraordinarily messy very quickly. And Microsoft Excel does not solve that, because you actually have to have attribution level data. So let me just pause there and get, this time we'll have Chris, then John go, and get your reaction. I put out there obviously what our view of the market is, but would love your reaction to what your challenges are at Citi and then over at MetLife. Please, Chris.
Right. Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, I think it's very difficult for us to find reliable external data, benchmark data for us to really inform our decisions. I mean, I think we look at what we can, but we more heavily rely on what we've paid in the past, right? So we look at our own internal data, which creates its own challenges. I think, I think we can get into kind of the life cycle of how the data hits the system and comes in, but we're looking at ways to improve our intake process to make sure we're tagging AFAs properly, we're tagging the fee arrangements properly, we're pulling all these things apart so that we can have better data internally. But because as Raj discussed, I think, it's very hard to find reliable data. Now, do we look at average discounts and different things and different reporting? Yeah, we talk about that when we talk about our hourly rate program and where we're going with that as we do our rate review, go through our rate review process. But it's just one kind of directional point, if you will. It's not what's really driving the whole conversation, because as Raj stated, that it varies, right? It varies on practice area, matter type, the seniority of a particular attorney, the region that you're working in. There are all these different factors that kind of, to say a certain law firm, their average discount is 15%, right? Or in the marketplace, or 20% even. That's just one kind of umbrella number that gives us some sense of, where we are relative to market, but it's not going to really inform or drive our buying decisions. There's a lot more work, I think, to be done there.
And Chris, appreciate if I could actually just follow up on that real quick before John goes, which is, you even just said a 15% say at a law firm, and let's just, whatever, we'll pick Skadden, they come to mind. Well, what's interesting, right, is how do you solve for the practice areas, right? Like my wife's world of fund formation of private funds, she lives on a different planet than the labor and employment group, right? They have,
Absolutely.
So yeah, and John, if you want to jump in on that, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, a lot of us, if we pull data from our e-billing tools, you can get your firm average rate, for example. But if you want to compare two employment law firms, but one of your employment law firms does M&A work for you as well, their average hourly rate is just going to be significantly higher than the other firm. So there's so many variables with legal matters, as Chris was saying. So, and then there's also the human error side. Benchmarking requires good data, and good data requires the development of useful fields and correct entry to those fields. And human beings we're fallible, and we all are and our jobs are busy. So it's very easy to make mistakes. Just a quick anecdote. 3 years ago, I did a massive analysis of our ERISA litigation, and worked with our data scientists at MetLife, create this beautiful presentation, but it was completely worthless because several of our attorneys were inputting data incorrectly, not tagging matters correctly, not differentiating between class actions and single plaintiff matters. And so it required me to go in and actually manually review every matter in there. And it was an extremely time-consuming process. So
it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, back in my law firm days and before I was at Citi, I worked at a large law firm and I practiced there, and I worked on the business side. And one of the big projects we took on was trying to fill in the blanks in our time card data, right? To go in because of the same thing. I think the same thing happens on the law firm side that we struggle with. I think on the client side is the way that data comes into the system. It's not always properly tagged. It's not always properly categorized so that you can quickly pull those reports by practice area or whatnot. So we went in and we actually worked with the Wharton School to their analytics program to try to fill in the blanks, right? And it was a long process, but it's a challenge. I think that's a big challenge. And I think the other missing component too of, our data struggles, and I'm sure that it's pretty common, are the outcomes, right? We can look at rates. Yep. We can look at the time, the length of matter, the overall cost, the average effective rates. We can look at all those things, but there's complexity and risk involved with every single matter that varies. And then what's the overall outcome? And I think measuring that is, if anybody's figured that out, to do that on a pretty wide basis, let me know, because it can be subjective. It's hard to collect that data. And every matter might have its own kind of individual outcome that's right for that, but it's not easily comparable to other areas. So,
I mean, you just might not have a large enough sample size, right, in a particular, because especially in the litigation world, the opposing counsel really can have an effect on your settlement total, the jurisdiction, the particular judge. So how do you analyze the result side and give with enough confidence that you feel that you give yourself enough confidence to act on that data at the end of the day. So.
Well, absolutely terrific. And Chris, you said it in a different context, but you said, hey, if you know anybody who solved this, well, with all due respect to the Wharton School, which is great, the machine learning team of actually a battle-tested vendor can get you pretty far. So if you don't mind putting the screen back up, one thing I wanted, and I'll get back, the talk about outcomes is terrific, and I'll get to that in a second, but if you go to the next slide, this is actually a slide I have to say just sort of internally I had my team create. I had never seen this data before, and it actually made my jaw drop because I didn't even realize. So let me explain what's going on here, which is this actually finally puts into numbers what John and Chris are talking about of the pain points. So when we talk, and we have big banks as our clients. We have 2 of the top 5 insurance carriers in the world. We have big private equity firms, big manufacturers. We have $20 billion of client data in the Bodhala system. And we always say that we data cleanse. And I can tell when we say that, some people say, okay, well, I've got an e-billing tool. It'll tell me if Skadden charges me $163,000 for that invoice. Well, the problem is not an invoice routing. E-billing is invoice routing. And procurement people would understand that. It's not doing anything beyond invoice routing. That's a huge win, but it's invoice routing. What I had my team bring up here is I was like, what do we do to the data, these algorithms that we talk about? And I myself was even blown out by the sheer volume here. So this is average per client. And let's say an average client maybe has 15 million of spend. We have clients that have hundreds of millions of spend. We have clients with a couple billion in spend. Just to get the data to apples, look at what our algorithms have to do. An average of 40,000 law firm standardizations, name standardizations, 63,000 timekeeper standardizations, expense reclassifications. So if you just stop and think about it, what Chris and John, what you were saying was, hey, it's manual. I'm going to be so bold to say it's not manual, it's impossible. This is like literally saying that you're going to go count all the money, in a bank. Well, you're going to use computers to do that. You literally cannot. The reason the industry has failed all of us collectively is because this is beyond the realm of the human capacity, and with limited budgets and busyness, you just can't do it in Microsoft Excel and Tableau and so on. A machine has to do it. And if you go to the next slide, please, Sylvia, these are just to bring it home, the examples. The law firm name consistency. Look at these 6 different ways of GDC. That simple example of Gibson Dunn and Crutcher, all caps Gibson Dunn and Crutcher, GDC. Literally, the standardization of the law firm name will frack data inside an e-billing tool and make it. Now, take the timekeeper name. My wife's name is Monica Aurora. She could be Monica K. Aurora. She could be MK Aurora, and so on. And then, of course, the third one and the fourth one is when you really get into the meat of it, and which is costing your enterprises millions of dollars, which is you can't even trust the titles. So one law firm, I'll leave their name out of it, they have a well-known practice of taking a certain class of 7th to 10th year associates and calling them a partner and charging them 20% more. So even the classification of partner or associate, or even junior partner to senior partner, can be extraordinarily misleading and then frack your data. And then, of course, you're getting into the discounts. So I already went through that example of the net effective rate. So these kind of data challenges, again, we would I'd love Chris and John's view, which is like, do you live these things, and like, do these things continue to frack data as you see it for you or in the industry generally? Chris, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think, we tend to rely on a lot of our internal data because, we have a large spend, right? So we've got a lot of internal data that we can pull from to do this, but it gets complicated, right? So to address, I think, your first point, or even on the prior slide about, being able to do this on some kind of scalable way, right? To do it across the board. It is impossible. We try to do this in a very surgical way, right? When we have one particular matter that we're trying to solve for, to get some information around, to provide context on what the pricing should be, to help those decisions, right? That's we can do it in that manner, but you're right. It's very difficult to do it in a large way because of all the variations in the data that come in. We try to solve for some of the timekeeper name. I mean, obviously we've got a timekeeper number, I think, for our law firms, and we're talking about just internal data that we tag them with. But then, in our systems, and because we are global and we've got, law firm A, B, or C with locations all over the world, they could be tagged with different locations. So we've got to kind of we've got to tag the ones we want to look at for a particular matter. So it gets to be a really manual, time-intensive process, and we're only solving for one matter at a time. And we have tens of thousands of matters a year. So big ticket matters, I think we can do it. We can devote the time to it, but to get to where kind of larger parts of the spend are aggregated across much smaller matters, that gets tricky, because for the reasons that you mentioned about trying to aggregate this data in a really precise way. Some of the other things too, like, yeah, we have our hourly rates on our system that are assigned to our law firms and individual timekeepers. But then, when we get into the world of AFAs and alternative fee arrangements, and how those are tagged and how those are accounted for, and whether we have shadow billing and can get to average effective rates and all those different pieces, it's very difficult, right? It's very difficult, and we try to fill in some of the blanks, but it is pushing a boulder up a hill, so to speak.
Well, that's why they pay the two of you the big bucks. John, agree with that? Disagree? Whatever, what feedback?
Yeah, definitely. So, the big ticket item, you can do an extra layer of due diligence and really dig into your numbers. But at least at MetLife, our big ticket items also tend to be a little more unique. And then we run into a sample size problem where do we really have enough past experience with this particular, large matter that we feel confident enough to really project for that. And then, the smaller, more routine matters to really do benchmarking. Yeah, you just don't have enough time and resources to do that. So, and really that's where your benchmarking is your internal numbers would probably be more accurate if you had the capability to actually, really dig into it. And then kind of, Chris brought up AFAs. I think we all want to push towards, AFAs and, getting rid of the hourly billing, but how do you really feel confident? One of the issues we run into is confidence when negotiating a fixed fee because of the lack of past data. So it's constantly an issue where we'll ask, we go through an RFP process, we ask firms to give us a fixed fee arrangement, and we lack the confidence in our data to really know how accurate or whether we could trust that fixed fee figure. So as a result, you're pretty much relying on the law firms there, and averaging off, 5 different law firms, what they, the total hours they expect it to be. And so, yeah, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's the slogan from Rob Redford in the candidate, right? There's a better way. Chris, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, to John's point, I think where we end up and where we're starting to drive to is to do more RFPs, right? To go to market more often because we don't have that data. I think, one of the first AFA discussions that I jumped into when I joined Citi, it was kind of in process already. And I got the proposal and I went back to the firm. It was a prominent law firm, obviously won't name any names, and let's just say the fee was a flat fee of $100,000. And I very, politely asked, well, how did you come up with that number? And the firm very candidly said back to me, oh, it's not rocket science. It's just how much we think it's going to cost, right? So I think the other struggle with AFAs and not having the data to really validate a lot of this is that there are firms that are very sophisticated in pricing, right? I've seen it firsthand. There are a lot of firms that believe in it, that do it. But I think there's a logistical problem too. They might have 5 pricing people and 1,000 lawyers, right? So they're not going to hit every matter. And a lot of fee arrangements are going to get pushed through that aren't necessarily kind of getting that level of sophistication. And, we're getting proposals when it's not a competitive bidding process. We're getting proposals that we really need to scrutinize because they're not always based on their data, right? Which we would hope. And when I talk to law firms about AFAs, I'd make it very clear to them that look, we want to see the background. We want to see how you came up with this number. If you're going to make a proposal to us on a matter for an AFA, we want to see some of the background data, right? The aggregated data that you use to develop this number. And that's helpful in kind of setting the expectation out of the gate. But really, again, to John's point, kind of going to market is like the last, best tool I think that we have right now, because we don't, we can't always say, well, we've done 100 of these matters and we know exactly how much it's going to cost and this is what it should be. If we could do that, I think it would be a lot easier. But making them bid against each other, I think, has been a very effective tool.
Well, exactly. And let me make a few comments there, which is our company actually started, and we still have, a very slick bidding tool. And we absolutely believe that spot competition is vital. I will say, to really get to market data, you would have to literally RFP every matter. And our culture, as we all know, just isn't there yet. And in fact, a little bit of history before, I think we once even did an RFP at MetLife. And there was interest. This is years ago, John. and there was interest there. But I do think we have a cultural resistance at some point, and hopefully that's breaking down. But ultimately, data is data. You're going to need that anyway. Doing RFPs, of course, I think is a smart step, but it doesn't build the foundation of what is really needed for the industry, for procurement and business principles that really take hold. One talk track that may be useful for people listening, which is, and I see we have some questions in the chat. I would encourage anybody to put any. Thank you, George, for Chris and John. You may look at the chat if you have any comments on what George has said. But if anybody else, please post there in our final 20 minutes. Is that, and this is a talk track that I think people find interesting, which is if you look at a buy side, sell side market, every market has a buy side and a sell side. I gave a consumer example of a hamburger, and there's of course many vendors of hamburgers, and consumers understand that. But there are 5 attributes that the buy side always deserves to have. They get price discovery, right? So if McDonald's tries to charge me $30 for the Big Mac, the trade doesn't clear. I get the benefit of competition. McDonald's can't charge me $30 because Burger King is charging $5. I get the benefit of data. So as a consumer, I understand at the click of a button on my phone how much these things should cost. The innovation I benefit from because I am the buyer. So when there is a new innovation in how you order, again, I'm staying in the hamburger example to make sure people are listening here, which is if there's a new technology of a kiosk to order, I get the benefit of that and they eat the cost because I'm the consumer. And the 5th is that there's an accountability on the vendor. So if McDonald's starts making me sick as a buyer, I'm not going to use them anymore. All 5 attributes of buy-side leverage do not exist for the buyer of legal services. Chris, John, you don't have it. The people on this call don't have it. You do not have the benefit. Now, RFPs, by the way, on a spot matter is a great example of trying to reclaim that leverage. But what we would say, and Sylvia, if you could put up the final slide, which is the ultimate way to have the buy side reclaim leverage. And it's not about being anti-law firm, it's about pro-value. There are certain times where we have clients, and you may be surprised to hear that, we tell our clients, you should pay that law partner more money. The value he's providing to in that practice area is vast. But why? And we call it the Lebron problem. You know, in sports, there's an efficient market. But guess what? And I don't know the Lakers well enough to know who the 6th guy on the bench is. But that dude doesn't get paid like LeBron gets paid, right? And guess what? I think there's probably no amount of money that LeBron's worth because he's that good. But the 6th guy on the bench doesn't get paid like LeBron. Most of you are paying bench warmers LeBron-like money for your law firms because your data isn't clear enough to disaggregate that. So that's why the metrics that we talk about are like breaking out by practice area, making sure that the rates are apples to apples, and of course breaking apart those discounts, which is a real key point. So I might ask John, Chris, any comments on the LeBron example? Is that something that you worry about?
I was going to ask if we could get a salary cap like they had in the NBA for outside counsel costs.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the problem, because I'm a former politician. The lawyers run our regulatory system, so the answer is no. But
no,
anyway, Chris,
yeah, we've run into that, right? And I mean, there are certain times where exceptions need to be made, and that does create imbalances, I think, in our approach and our system, our strategy. Raj, one of the things we've been talking with your team about is, how do we kind of reimagine the system, right, to find that balance, to supplement it with data. And we've had a lot of conversations about that, and we're still working our way through it because we have our own unique challenges in house, but that we're trying to solve for. But yeah, I mean, it makes it difficult to kind of put this whole structure in place. But there are going to be times when the risk and complexity of a matter is going to require a premium, and there needs to be flexibility. There needs to be structures in place to make sure that you're working with all your internal stakeholders to be transparent about that when that happens, right? Because I mean, they might recognize the risk, but you got to talk about what the financial cost of that's going to be on the back end, right? How much,
yeah,
and what that's going to do to the system, right? And it's just it's something that we need to deal with, right? Because these things do happen, and sometimes you need to bring in a LeBron to get the win, right? I mean, it's just
Absolutely.
It's how it goes. So there needs to be a certain amount of flexibility, but a lot of communication, I think, when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say communication's key there, and really at the end of the day, what it's about is you want to align your interests with your law firm so that you're a true partner on those type of matters, and we've used success fees, for example, in the past where we needed the Lebron or the true rainmaker or whatever you want to describe them on a matter. So but it's really about aligning expectations and then open communication so there's a trust there when that happens.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrific. What I just to pull back to the alternative fee discussion, Chris, you brought it up a couple times, and John, you made a comment on it. I love your point, John, around like, I can't tell you how many inbound inquiries we have where people say, hey, we think we're doing well and we're kind of, the boss is happy with these flat fees. We have no idea where to set the level of flatness. I mean, right? And what we often hear anecdotally is, we don't think we're setting it properly because the law firms aren't squealing. So it's like, that's the level of data in our industry that we're resorting back to just using emotion to just say, because we're not hearing this, we must assume that there's still like, and so I definitely think that because as I said on that buy side, sell side riff, that the entire industry set up for the economics of the law firm vendor, the law firms are genetically built on the billable hour. Like it's literally in their software, so even when they give a flat fee, they track the hour, as the both of you know, they're doing shadow billing because they have to do it for utilization and compensation reasons. So there's really not a way ultimately, unless the buy side of the market really says we're going to challenge the law firm billing model to, I think, effectively, even though there's been conversation for 20 years about this, to kill the billable hour, because ultimately the vendor is it's in part, it's like their organ. So I don't know, Christian, any comment you would have or feedback on that? Feel free to, if I'm all wet on that, please feel free to say so.
No, I mean, look, I have fee negotiation, rate negotiation discussions with law firms quite frequently, right? And I think those usually take a turn towards us, getting to the bottom of what's driving it, right? And understanding, because I get it. I was at a law firm. I kind of see how that works. I worked on partner comp, and different things, and it really gets down to how it's going to impact everybody's year end, their comp, their promotion, all of that, right? And so it's not just about the firm is definitely there to make money. There's no doubt about that, right? But I think on an individual basis, there is emotion there because it's going to impact, their increase, their bonus at the end of the year, and how they're viewed at the firm, right? I mean, a lot of those metrics really play into their kind of the perception of that partner, right? If they're able to get a higher rate or higher profitability, obviously over the past, like, I guess 5-10 years, it's been a shift from, I guess the more general, like, realization, utilization, those metrics towards profitability. And there's been attempts to measure that. And that really, partners get tagged with that. I've seen, and I'm sure through the circuit of different conferences too, you see that how they communicate those statistics on a more regular basis to their partners, to their attorneys, and how they're doing. So it really does affect them individually. And I think it's important to, to recognize that. You don't always have to mention it, but just to know that when you're kind of working through these things, I think it does help, move the conversation along. But at the end of the day, right, like it's still very much based on emotion, right? And I think it's hard for us to get to that bottom line otherwise sometimes.
Well, if I could just say, I think COVID was a record year for law firm profitability. And I can say that the law firm partner talk track of, oh my God, the sky is falling, if I dare have a rate increase of 3% versus 10, is belied by the fact that their margins are still massive. Right. The law firms will never do anything that loses them money, and they always do things that usually make them a lot of money. And another riff that I think has been successful, we've heard from of our clients, which is if you recall, and Chris, John, having been at law firms, I believe it's something like 85% of the cost basis of a law firm is in the people. And remember that they're equity partner owned. So as opposed to, say, a construction company that has the price of 1,000 supplies, the price of glass went up in China, the price of steel went up in the Europe, so therefore my cost went up. When they raise their rates, they're basically saying, I want to pay myself more, because our law firm's business is to take cash in, and at the end of the day, take the kitty and divide it up for the equity partners. So they actually, it's not like the price of laptops went up. A law firm is literally pencils, laptops, and then big salaries. So it's an interesting window because of all the things that you emotionally mentioned, Chris. When you peel it back as an economist would, the market is more irrational than probably we really even care to admit. There's a great question from John Christensen. And John, if you wouldn't mind, or Sylvia, you can probably get your email. We can actually get you some great content on exactly what, free content on what data requirements are. I'm glad you mentioned Sally. I don't know if Chris and John have interacted with it, but it's an organization, it's an effort that we respect and admire, which is some law firm professionals who have tried to adopt a little bit, not quite salary cap like John, but the notion is, hey, can we on the law firm side of the house actually get some uniformity across our data standards? My 2 cents is that, again, law firms only do what their clients say. So the people with the power to make the market in this world are John and Chris. When the John and Chris and their bosses and their departments and the huge brands they represent and the dollars they represent say, look, we're no longer going to be passive and accept the world and the data that you give us. Here are our specs, and here is the operating system for what we need, and you must conform. That will be the crossing the Rubicon moment for our industry and our profession. I think is really interesting. So John, and I see John's on the Zoom. Sylvia, does that mean John, we can hear from John directly? Is that how this works?
He is talking permitted. So John, can we hear you?
Yes, you can.
John, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm loving all the comments from Chris and John. I mean, it's incredible feedback to get from clients what they're looking for in the procurement process. We since 2013, our firm has been, requiring phase task coding for all areas of law. And what we find is that, as y'all both mentioned, a lot of the reliability of that data is completely human error built in. But, we feel like we've gotten some value, at least in helping us respond to RFPs, procurement. But I'm curious to know, other than my Sally question, or, what data points firms can work on to better align with clients, is how often do you use your e-billing systems do you use your phase task data other than just to see what should or shouldn't be paid on an invoice, or do you actually kind of factor that into the procurement process when you're talking about alternative fees?
Before John and Chris answer, John Christensen, what law firm are you with?
With Baker Donaldson.
Great, thank you, John, for your question. So John Smith or Chris, whomever.
Yeah, I'll step in here. Yeah, we do use the matter phase codes, or we try to, but we run into the same issue where it's a very time-consuming process where for example, you have to identify you have to try getting apples to apples comparison. So if you want, like, for example, to analyze single plaintiff employment discrimination matters, you have to have the correct filters applied, and make sure that our attorneys, when they onboard the matter, put the correct filters on, so that when you go into your e-billing system, you can get a true apples to apples comparison. And frankly, the human error side makes that very, very difficult. Now, if you're looking at an individual matter, yeah, then So, I can go back to, John Smith versus MetLife. Yeah, then the matter phase codes become very useful. But you have to aggregate it with other similar matters, and I think that's where the challenge lies.
Right, I would agree, and I think we're still looking for ways to incorporate it more into those the pricing analysis, right? But we do use that information quite a bit during the legal bill review process, right? I think it really helps our team because we have like everyone, I'm sure there's some kind of systemic billing adjustments that are made, right, just based on timing or different things or what have you. But we have a team that manually reviews bills, right? And it helps them kind of understand the structure, who's working in what phases, who's doing what, and it helps us identify when there's too much time or multiple timekeepers spent doing tasks within certain parts of a matter. And that's where it's been most useful for us, but we are obviously looking for more ways to use that data.
And I would kind of step in there that, most companies, though, I would assume, Chris, aren't Citi size where they can have a team devoted to invoice review, right? So, I mean, MetLife, we are a large company, but we don't have a team assigned invoice review. It's up to the individual managing attorney on the matter to do it. So.
Thanks, John Christensen. We appreciate it very much. I think Varun had a question in the chat. Sylvia, are we able to get to Varun Bhatia here? Awesome. Varun, you asked a good question, then we'll get to George, which is around benchmarking. Sure, yes, but obviously we have some pretty groundbreaking benchmarks. We can talk about that later, but could you maybe tell us a little bit more about what are you in the market for in terms of benchmarks? How do you approach it? What are your challenges now?
So thanks, Raj. Thanks, John. Thanks, Chris. So just to brief you, so I'm not on the law firm side. I'm on the service provider side. So I'm kind of alternate legal service provider to different companies and different law firms. So that's when I wanted to ask about how's the benchmarking done in Bodhala. Compared to is it specifically towards the law firm side, or would that also encompass ALSP benchmarks, or a comparison between law firms and alternate service providers?
Awesome. I'll take that first, and then have Chris and John react. And by the way, I just saw on your LinkedIn, Varun, are you in India?
Yes.
Well, thanks for accommodating the time change, and more importantly, all of us in the Indian diaspora are thinking of what's happening in India now. I hope everyone's safe.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course, we're checking WhatsApp eagerly. Quick, Varun raises a great point. I am not familiar with his ALSP directly, but benchmarking is obviously, as we've talked about earlier in this discussion, a huge deliverable of a company like Bodhala, sure. But what's interesting, and I think for the attendees, is that we are getting more increasing requests for the notion of what we call the Great Unbundling, which is to say, look, let's take an M&A deal, for example, which is one of the most important. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that violin. That's live in Zoom. Sarah, could you please shut the door? Thank you. Sorry. So, yes, exactly. I want her to practice her violin, but not during the Blind Legal Counsel webinar. So in any case, what we call the Great Unbundling is the fact that even on that precious M&A deal, which let's say culturally we understand to be the most sensitive, needs the highest level of talent, and so on, there is a good 30% of the tasks in that matter that have no business being out of big fancy law firm. And that's why there is the rise. Again, I don't know Varun's shop, but there are many ALSPs coming out, and they're doing very high quality work. So the ask that we're getting from our clients that we're happy to oblige is, can you help us, guide us to unbundle the data so that we don't have to go to Skadden for, let's say there's 100 tasks, on 30 of those tasks. So say it's a $5 million matter. 2 million of that $5 million can be done for $500,000. And so we can take $1.5 million of cost out of that because we're just getting it to the right provider. And so that is absolutely something that we're seeing. And Chris, John, I don't know if you have any comments on that, and then we'll go to George to wrap up and get you everybody on their way.
I mean, I would just agree with the unbundling aspect of it, right? To really be able to drill down on the specific attributes of the particular matter that we're looking at, and being able to drill down on that. So I think that's really important. That's where we're heading, right? Because it's got to be, I hate to keep using the term apples to apples, but when we're looking at matters and we're comparing information, it really needs to be. And if we can get to that point, that's going to be the most useful, one of the most useful, I think, uses of our data.
John, anything more? Should we can go to George if you have. We can go to George's question. I know we only have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Chris summed up that, very, very nicely. It's something
terrific
to do, and it's definitely a challenge, though.
Great, George. Sorry, thank you, Varun, for your question. Again, best of luck to everything in India, George. If you can give us a question for the next minute, we'll have comments and then we'll wrap up. Thank you for being patient, George.
Can you hear me okay?
We got you.
Wonderful. So we've had the opportunity to work with AmLaw 50 law firms extensively looking at their billing, e-billing collection process, and also redesigning legal department processes worldwide. So it's been fun on both sides of the fence. But thank you, first of all, for your great comments. I guess the question is, as we look at the data, we obviously, then what do we do next? One of the things that brought up was normalization of data between law firms and legal departments. But the other is, how do they work together on complex matters? Are there opportunities out there to streamline those processes to effectively reduce rates? And so I know that's kind of an afterthought after the data, but we've seen a lot of opportunity in that area. So I just wanted to ask you about those kind of process opportunities.
Please go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, I guess we're kind of talking about more like legal project management, right? To have our people train the firms to be more efficient, or at least drive them to do it. I mean, it's something we think about and we want to do. But here's the challenge. I think we've got amazing attorneys in house. We really do, top tier internal attorneys, and they are great lawyers, but they spend a lot of time doing the legal work, right? So kind of asking them to then take on these additional tasks of monitoring the leverage on a certain matter, or the efficiency, or the kind of the deep dive details of how efficient each firm is running a matter is difficult. In fact, they look to us to do that where we can, right? So again, I think almost full circle, it comes back to being able to look at the data to identify the areas, the firms that we could work with to improve their efficiency, and then come back to them. But in my view, at least, I think that's how we're going to have to do it in our environment. But it's certainly something that's on our roadmap to be able to do. But again, it's going to be very dependent on the ability to pull apart the data and identify those weaknesses, those firms where they're not kind of operating at that level of efficiency and optimizing that.
Yes.
John, close us out.
All right. Yeah. I mean, it's similar. It's, we've analyzed particular types of matters where, we've shifted work from what the law firms to, paralegals in-house, and leave the law firms to do kind of the legal work side of it, therefore reducing the denominator side, the total hours. But yeah, it's a very, our kind of going to Chris's point, our lawyers, you're paying them at the end of the day to be lawyers, to practice law, and not so much, their time is probably better spent being lawyers as opposed to, case managers or so. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's something we want to do, but it's often a question of resources.
Well,
the time to do so.
Well, I really appreciate everybody. I'm just going to close this out with one final thought, which is, we all went to law school here. I think we can all agree that in the ideal state of this profession and industry, which we're not remotely at yet, lawyers can be lawyers and business people can be business people. and that probably means a good thing for our bank accounts, for the treasury accounts of our companies, and also frankly, probably for our day-to-day happiness. So I think we're all on that journey. So please join me for the attendees in thanking John Smith and Chris Ochs from MetLife and Citi respectively. Did a tremendous job walking through. Thanks for the candid comments, for the really for the interesting perspectives. Sylvia, as always, thank you very much for hosting. Again, I'm Raj Goyle from Bodhala. Please, I'm at raj@bodhala.com. We'd love to talk to you if you have any follow-up questions and have any conversations that come from this. Have a great rest of the day, and thank you for your time.